my name is Macy Davis, and this is my video presentation over my observations. My first observation was done at Rosebud Elementary School. It was in the kindergarten classroom in the town of Rosebud, and I observed Miss Beth Hayden's English class. My second observation was also at Rosebud Elementary School, where I observed the first grade. This was also in the town of Rosebud, and Miss Tanya Chandler was the classroom teacher, and they were going over English. My third observation was also at Rosebud Elementary School, the second grade in the town of Rosebud, and it was Miss Shonda Cotton's classroom, and they were going over science. My fourth observation was at Guy Perkins Elementary School, where I observed the third grade. This was in the town of Guy, and it was Miss Emily Harris's class, and they were going over reading. My fifth observation was at Heber Springs Elementary School, where I observed the special ed resource classroom. It was in the town of Heber Springs, and it was Miss Katie Finley's class, and they were going over math. My sixth observation was at Guy Perkins Elementary School, where I observed a self-contained special ed class. It was in the town of Guy, and Miss Rachel Williams was the teacher, and they were going over reading. My seventh observation was at Guy Perkins Elementary School, where I observed the gifted and talented classroom. It was in the town of Guy, and I observed Miss Amber Smith's class, where they went over critical thinking skills. And my last observation was at Pathfinder Academy School. It was the inclusive sight special ed class, and it was in the town of Jacksonville, and Miss Elisa Harper was the teacher, and they were going over reading and communication skills. So my first observation for my kindergarten classroom at Rosebud Elementary School was a glow for that class was that the students enjoyed an activity where the teacher sang nursery rhymes and let the students fill in the words that she left out. She would go over nursery rhymes and leave out like half of the song or a few words, and it was very impressive how much like a kindergarten classroom had memorized from just singing nursery rhymes. Something to grow on was that this class was extremely energetic, and the teacher had a hard time keeping everybody calm and staying on task. So a suggestion would be to find a way to encourage good behavior and instead of just focusing on their bad behavior. But it's a good observation, and overall the attention span is very narrow for a kindergarten student, so I could understand how the teacher had like a lot of stress, and it was a hard grade to control. But it's very important for the development of these young students, because if it's their first step in education, then this is a big building block for their education. The second observation was also at Rosebud for the first grade, Miss Tanya Chandler's English class. A glow for their class, something good about them, was that the teacher went through various exercises dealing with the words, sounds, and sentences. So they started off by going over multiple different words and splitting words in half and counting words in a sentence. And so all of these activities really got each of the students involved, and they really seemed to enjoy that. Something to grow from them, this class would be the teacher asked the class if anyone needed to take an AR test. So they had taken a book home and they needed to take a test over it, and this kind of caused a lot of distraction in the class because the teacher was forced to just deal with this one student as they were taking their AR test, and kind of caused a lot of disruption with the rest of the students that were not being focused on as much as that one student. Overall, the students at this age level in the classroom seem extremely smart. It was very impressive, like the difference between the kindergarten and first class. For only being in school for like a year from kindergarten and then half a year of first grade, it was impressive of how much they knew. My third observation was at Rosebud Elementary School, the second grade. It was Miss Shonda Cotton's class, and they were going over science. A glow, something good from their class, was they were doing a science experiment, and they did it with shaving cream and food coloring. It was really fun for the class. And after they got done doing the science experiment, they took their shaving cream to their desks, and they practiced spelling words, which was fun for the students, and it was getting something academically accomplished for the teacher. Something to work on in this class. Although they did the experiment first, they switched to doing the spelling after that, and then they went back and focused on the experiment. So I thought it would have been helpful if they would have stayed on the same topic, like if they would have stayed on the science topic, and after doing the experiment they would have filled out the worksheet and then switched to the shaving cream on the desks. So they just, like, instead of going from science to spelling, they would have stayed on science and then moved to spelling. But overall, this was a fun class to observe. It was interesting to see how much they knew and how they cooperated with each other. It was crazy to go from first grade to second grade to see how much mature they have gotten in just like another year. So that was a good observation. My fourth observation was at Guy Perkins Elementary School, where I observed the third grade. It was Miss Emily Harris's class, and they were going over reading. So a glow would be, it was very, the teacher was very knowledgeable, and she explained a lot to me, like as they went and learned different things. The teacher would tell me what they were doing and how that was helpful for them. Something that was really cool was that they did dojo points, which I had never heard of, but I found out in other observations that this was a common thing, and it was extremely helpful. So students would get a dojo point. It was something good if they were staying on task or doing what they were supposed to do. Like, a reward would be to get a dojo point, which did help a lot. So that would be something that was definitely a glow. Something to grow from. The students were working with Chromebooks, and they had many problems. Like, each of the Chromebook had something they had to deal with, like a password wasn't working or it was dead. Like, the teacher told me that they had lots of technology issues, that they weren't really up to date with their technology. So that would be something that not just the teacher but the whole school could like grow from, just maybe getting some updates in that area. But overall, this was an excellent class to observe. Not only did they like listen very well, but the teacher was engaged with them through the whole thing. It was very enjoyable, and you could tell they had a good behavior, like they had a good bond between each other because the students did what the teacher asked always. But this was a very good observation because I learned a lot, and I feel like I can use what I learned from this class when I'm a teacher. So that was a good one. So the fifth observation I did was at Heber Springs Elementary School, and I observed the special ed resource class. It was Miss Katie Finley's class, and they were going over math. A glow from this class. The teacher seemed to know like each of her students like personally, so it helped when they had problems. She knew what they needed to work on, what they had already accomplished. So knowing your teacher or knowing your students really helps in the special ed classroom for sure. A grow would be that this classroom was in the same room as another class. She was teaching her class, and there was another teacher teaching another class, like in the same classroom, and this was super distracting even for me to pay attention to the one teacher that I was observing, and it was the same problem with the students. So that was definitely something that could be like growing from, like they should get that figured out for sure. But overall, this was a interesting observation. It seems like a stressful job to teach a special ed class, but there's teachers out there for that, and they were awesome people. It's very rewarding to teach kids like that, and when they accomplish something, you feel like you accomplished something, so it's good. The 6th observation I did at Guy Perkins School was the self-contained classroom, and I observed Miss Rachel Williams, and they were going over reading. A glow would be that something good. I liked how this classroom, it had 2 separate classrooms that they stayed in one classroom to do like academic work, like sit down, do your math homework, and then it had a door separating into another classroom where they were like different, like a physical therapist or occupational therapist would come in there and work with the kids, and they could be more like rowdy in that classroom. So the grow would be from the more rowdy classroom, because it got kind of chaotic, because there was no like real like structure to that classroom, so it got out of hand quickly. So even though it was good to have like playtime, it was hard to keep them under a rein when like they were allowed to do whatever they wanted. So if they could work on something to learn from while they're having fun, that would be a good grow for that classroom. Overall, this was a good experience for me, because I hadn't really experienced this much of a large classroom in a special ed class, but it's crazy to see how the teachers interact with the students, because they are really good at their job, and you can tell they care about their students and their success. My 7th observation was at Guy Perkins also. It was the gifted and talented classroom. Miss Amber Smith was the teacher, and they were going over critical thinking skills. The glow for this would be that they played games, and it was fun for the students, and they were learning something while they did it, and they got competitive, so they enjoyed it, and it was a good teaching experience. A grow for this would be that the class also did not have a lot of structure, even though it was gifted and talented kids, and they like knew what they were supposed to do, and since they didn't have a lot of rules, they kind of got out of hand. At a couple times they started talking to each other instead of staying on task. So if they could be more structured, like the class could be more structured, I think that would help them learn more, since they're already gifted and they don't need lots of help, but they need more structure so they can learn more. So overall, it was a fun observation, getting to see students who were above average of their great age group. So going from special ed to gifted and talented was also a big difference. The students seemed to be interested in learning when they were going over something they wanted to learn. So it was a good observation for sure. My last observation was at Pathfinder Academy School. It was the inclusive site, the special education class in Jacksonville, and Miss Alyssa Hooper was the teacher, and they went over reading and comprehension skills. The class I observed had lots of communication difficulties, and so a glow from this class would be that there was many moments of teaching that were not like strictly academic, but like more helpful in everyday life, like just small tasks that we take for granted, like putting our socks on and taking them off and turning them inside out, was extremely difficult for some of the students. So it was crazy to see, but it was awesome how the teachers were interacting with the students. Something to grow would be, maybe a good suggestion would be like sign language for this particular class. Since they had problems communicating, they could still move like with their arms and their hands and stuff. So I feel like sign language would be a good alternative for some of the students. They knew a few words, like when they needed help, or yes, or when they needed to go to the restroom. But I feel like really getting sign language involved in their class would help the teachers and the students get what they wanted out of it. Overall, it was a very eye-opening and great experience. The teachers showed love and compassion for each student, and so much patience. I couldn't even imagine how much patience it took to be a teacher for that class, but I appreciate the special education teachers because it is a tough job and it was a very good experience. So those are my observations. Thank you.